Thank you for coming to this session. I understand I'm probably the last man standing between you and drinks. Oh, literally between you and drinks. So thanks for coming to session. I'll try to make it very entertaining and informative. So hopefully you'll get a lot of information out of it. My name is Vakhtang Asatryan. For those who don't know me, I'm Asia Communications TSP lead. I work for Microsoft. I'm based in Melbourne. When we were thinking what kind of sessions we want to bring to Ignite, we've been thinking and analyzing, looking what kind of conversations we have with our customers and partners. We've noticed that there's a lot of common topics popping up in our conversations, and we decided to bring these topics for a review. We're going to run a couple of interesting sessions tomorrow. Those are going to be video interop masterclass and voice interop masterclass. And today I'm going to cover the architecture options for implementing Skype for Business. To give you a bit of a kind of housekeeping, we have our super partner Plantronics from our ecosystem, and Plantronics gave us some giveaways. I've got 3 headsets to give away today. Please keep the questions till the end. And the deal is you ask a very good, interesting question, and we'll give you the headset. So let's kick in. We'll talk about directory synchronization. We'll talk about the architecture for your authentication, what you need to do when you're deploying Skype for Business. And we'll go through deployment options, Skype for Business Online, Skype for Business Server, and Hybrid. And everything that we're going to tell you, it really incorporates all the latest information we have. There's been a lot of changes. We've been doing a lot of interesting announcements. So all that information really going to be covered in our session. I'm going to present you with a lot of URLs through the session. So whenever those sessions are available, please download the session files, use those URLs, because everything is referenceable. And also, the last point before I start, please submit the evaluation forms, because this is very, very critical and crucial for us to actually hear your feedback. We value it, so we can adjust the topics that we are covering through our next sessions on Ignites coming up. So, oops. As they say, clicker doesn't work. We have to do it manually. Right, I'll do it manually. Your battery is low on 6%. Directory synchronization and authentication. Why do we really need to think about this topic? And usually in most of the deployments, we have our Active Directories deployed with our on-premises deployment in some kind of form or shape. Is it one single forest? Is it multiple forest? Resource forest, one domain, multiple domain. But whenever you start actually consuming some of the services from the online environment, you actually need to start thinking about my directory synchronization option and authentication. So how do I create my users online? How do I synchronize the passwords? And how do I give my users that single consistent experience when they log in into online systems? They don't need to remember every time and create the different entries into identities, go retyping the passwords. All that kind of topics really taken care by directory synchronization, authentication. So the goal for establishing directory synchronization is to set a kind of relationship between your Azure online tenant Active Directory and between your on-premises Active Directory. So for those who don't know, whenever you sign up and create your online Office 365 tenant, we by default provide you with Azure Active Directory. You want it or no, we do that. And we also ask you, when you sign up to the tenant, we ask you to provide a domain. And we usually, by default, we call it's an on-Microsoft domain, vakhtang.onmicrosoft.com. That's going to be the domain. So I can use my tenant, Azure Active Directory created tenant. I can create that domain and create various users like Vakhtang, Kate, John, Bob. I can create those users, and I can let users actually to sign in into online services. For that purpose, I don't need to do any directory synchronization authentication because the user will be purely created in the cloud, his password will live in the cloud, and then whenever I sign in into the cloud service, let's say I want to sign into Skype for Business Online, or whenever I sign into SharePoint Online or Exchange Online, I am authenticated against online cloud Azure Active Directory. But what if I am a user on-premise? I already exist within my domain. And what if I would like to sign in with my corporate, let's say, credentials into online service? That's the time when you need to think of directory synchronization and authentication. So directory synchronization is a process that takes your identities that exist within online system and brings them and create them, synchronize them inside Azure Active Directory Online. Now, also directory synchronization in some cases is a prerequisite for the hybrid deployments. You have to create them, the directory, create those accounts, which makes sense. I need to bring my account online so I can assign my licenses and activate various services online. The tools currently are used for directory synchronization, and there is kind of nothing wrong or right with those tools. You can use any of these tools to take the identity of the on-premise user and synchronize and create that identity inside online environment. You can use the DirSync, and DirSync tool has been available for a while. You can use directory synchronization services, or you can use Azure Active Directory Connect tool, or they call it connector. So what we have seen in a lot of, as we call it, greenfield environments, if you don't have anything else, if you don't have existing synchronization technology, we've seen our customers using Azure Active Directory Connect tool. There are some benefits using that, especially in case if you are using a multiple forests on-premise, or if you're deploying some applications inside your resource forest, which we'll cover a little bit later. But it really depends. So there are some URLs. I encourage you to have a look at those URLs. And probably the first one you probably need to have a look is laser doesn't work. The bottom one, which is the tools comparison, which will give you very detailed comparison between the different tools. And again, there is no right or wrong tool. There is no the best tool. It's really you need to choose the tool that will help you to achieve your goal. So once I created my identity in the cloud, yes, wachtang@microsoft.com, let's say I'm synchronized it is created and available online inside Azure. I can't sign into that cloud account. I can't be authenticated because by default, it may not have my password. So in a business of authenticating, there are two ways you can handle the password synchronization, basically. One way you can use either DirSync or Azure Active Directory Connect password synchronization option, which means I will tell my tool to take the hashes, the password hash that sit inside the domain controllers, and synchronize it and put that password hash into the Azure Active Directory. Which means now Azure Active Directory, the online directory, will have not only my username, but it always also will have my password. And next time when I actually connect, let's say I want to log into Skype for Business Online service, it actually will recognize my username and it will also recognize my password. I can be authenticated, log in, and actually start doing using the services. But in some cases, again, these are not the drivers, some very specific cases where customer is not happy synchronizing those hashes across. And in some cases, by various, again, business requirements, customer may prefer to use basically claim-based authentication. What does it mean? It means whenever I log in into the online environment, I don't want my online environment to authenticate me, but rather I want to be redirected back into Active Directory and let my on-premise Active Directory to authenticate me. So that's where the Azure Active Directory Federation services come into place. So to summarize, for the authentication business, you can do it in two ways. One way, using Active Directory, Azure Active Directory connector tool to synchronize your passwords into online environment and let cloud to authenticate me, or use the ADFS to basically refer me back to the local Active Directory and be authenticated against local Active Directory. There are two options. Now, those two options are global. If I enable ADFS within my organization, then I cannot selectively say Kate can authenticate with cloud option, and Vachtan can only authenticate using on-premises Active Directory. If I enable authentication with ADFS, that means for every application I use online, for every user I have, everyone will be referred back to my local ADFS service, will be back referred to the Active Directory on-premise to be authenticated. Okay? Why we're really thinking about this? Because this will then affect the way you deploy hybrid. Especially in a hybrid case, this will be very important for you to understand. So let's have a look at the deployment options. There are kind of three ways you can deploy Sky for Business. Sky for Business can be deployed online, which means it is deployed through the multi-tenanted platform from the data center. And you don't have to have any infrastructure on the premise. It's purely online deployment. Sky for Business can be deployed as a Sky for Business server on-premise. Now, I have to be a little bit careful saying on-premise because it doesn't mean on-premise have to be always on the premise of the customer. Sky for Business server can be deployed on-premise of the customer, can be deployed on-premise of the customer data center, or can be deployed on-premise of the service provider hosting it for customer, which means the key is it's a Sky for Business server, not online. Or the third option, you can basically deploy Sky for Business online, you can deploy Sky for Business server and bring them into the hybrid configuration, which is another option. So let's have a look through them. The Business Online, basically Sky for Business Online is the service that provisioned from Microsoft multi-tenant platform. A unique tenant is provided for our customers. And this is very consistent question we got from our multinational customers. If I'm operating in Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and US, and if I'm provisioned with a tenant in the United States, what does it mean to my business? It means every service you have will be coming from the tenant across United States. We do not today allow you to have a tenant to spread across the data centers. So you have to be very careful when you are evaluating where do I provision my tenant, right? That's a very key, important element. Now, Sky for Business Online doesn't provide specific functions. It is a different product. Sky for Business Online and Sky for Business On-Premise Server, when you compare them together. It doesn't provide QoS, although there is an option. If you would use the Express route, we would honor the QoS mappings inside Express route, which means you get Express route, and if you're not aware what Express route is a direct connection into Office 365 network, not via the public internet. It's a via dedicated private link. So we will honor them, whatever your service provider who provides Express route. You mark the packets, they will honor the packets, and once they hit our network, we will honor those packet markings. It doesn't provide call admission control. It doesn't provide response groups, and it doesn't provide some of the advanced telephony functionality. So be very, very specific when you're positioning Sky for Business Online. Sky for Business Online is great, but it is not necessary today is applicable for every telephony deployment. It may not necessarily actually address all the telephony needs. There is a URL which listing the PBX features currently available and supported by Sky for Business Online. It can support some complex topologies, and you need to be aware, you need to be very careful on the way you choose your domains, the way you choose the tenant domains. So it's a lot of work needs to be put in place before you actually provision the tenant and start bringing the services. So how it looks like, You sign up to Office 365 service. We provision you a tenant. The tenant gives you the Azure Active Directory. It gives you Sky for Business Online. Now, Sky for Business Online, architecturally no different to Sky for Business Server. It is front-end server exists, which is sitting deep inside our network, and there is an edge, online edge. And whenever you're connecting to the Sky for Business Online, you are actually connecting to the edge, through the edge, always back to the registering to the front-end server. Do I have to do the Active Directory synchronization? No, not necessary. Going back to the case where I said I can create a domain tenant as wachtang.onmicrosoft.com. And I can create user Wachtang, John, Bob, Alice, etc., etc. I can actually enable those users to be functional across. They can be provided with the Sky for Business Online. They will be the identities that exist inside the cloud. But in the case where you really would like to kind of bring this identities together, when you have a corporate identity for the user and you want that identity to be consistent across on-premise and online world, that's where you'll need to start thinking about Azure Active Directory Connect, which means it will synchronize your online users, will bring them, offline users, bring them into online. It can synchronize passwords so users can authenticate against cloud, or if you're not happy with that methodology, you can deploy Active Directory Federation services, and you can then be authenticated against on-premise services. So no infrastructure required in this case on-premise from the Sky for Business Server point. That's probably the only case where the online goes. There's nothing else. As you can see, there's no reverse proxies, no any other elements. It's purely services running online. Let's see how it actually maps to the on-premise deployment. On-premise is a server that can be deployed in a variety of the configurations and topologies. It supports resource forest, it supports native forest, it can be integrated with Exchange server online or Exchange server on-premise. Not different on a Sky for Business perspective to what we have been doing with 2010 and 2013. No different, exactly the same. The product hasn't changed. Sky for Business Server 2015, so far we've been talking about it for a long time. It is the next generation of Link server. So how it looks like, you will have your on-premises Active Directory with your user forest, or I probably shouldn't have a user forest as name, as a forest, which will have your domain. It will have your gateway infrastructure. You'll build your Sky for Business infrastructure. You'll build your Edge infrastructure. And then you provision, you connect your users, you extend your Active Directory, and you start accessing services from inside, outside, and through the voice gateway infrastructure, you can access voice services. No different. It's operating as it is, deployed as on-premise as a single AD forest. What you can do, you can go into the resource forest model. And I've seen a lot of actually organizations started thinking about it. If organizations have a model where I have got dedicated user forest, or I have got a server forest, or the organization very commonly asks that they are not happy to extend Active Directory of the user forests. Because when you deploy Sky for Business server, you have to extend Active Directory. So in case if those things are not actually on the wish list of a customer, you can build a dedicated AD, make that AD to act as a resource forest, and deploy Sky for Business in the resource forest itself. As you can see, in this case, we are extending Active Directory in the resource forest. The Sky for Business infrastructure, it's really deployed into resource forest, and you will need to use some kind of directory synchronization technology or tools that will basically sync up those accounts, specific Active Directory attributes from the user forest back to resource forest. No different. We've been operating this and supporting this since 2013 server, right? No difference. It is up and running. What actually, I've noticed, I've been engaged with some of the service providers for past 12 to 16 months happened. Service providers came with a proposition saying, actually, what I would like to do, I would like to take that Sky for Business server, bring it into my environment, and Mr. Customer would like to deliver you a service. And that Sky for Business can be delivered in two ways. Either infrastructure as a service, which means I'll give you a bunch of VMs and you'll deploy your Sky for Business in my data center because you don't want to have any data centers, and that's an option. Or alternatively, me as a service provider, I'll host it in my data centers, in my way, and I will give you a user and associated charges, which is called as a software as a service, right? And the most common methodology that actually I have seen service providers deploying is a resource forest, which means the resource forest sits within a service provider environment. Sky for Business infrastructure is deployed into that resource forest. The one-way trust has to be established. The specific Active Directory attributes needs to be mapped and synchronized back into resource forest, and users are enabled. It's fully supported Microsoft topology. It is up and running. We've seen a number of deployments. And this was probably one of the main go-to-market strategies from the service providers to provide managed Sky for Business service. What actually also we have noticed, in some cases when you have a very good relationship between a service provider and a customer, and where there's a very good trust established, some service providers actually offer to extend Active Directory from on-premise deployment into their hosted environment, which means me as a customer, if I extend my Active Directory, I actually now deploy Sky for Business into my Active Directory, and it's not different to what customer deploying Sky for Business service into their environment, because this is literally the same environment. It is just the red elements of Sky for Business infrastructure is hosted in the service provider environment. Why people would go into this mode? Because as up to probably a couple of weeks ago, we were saying in resource forest deployment, we would not allow service provider to deploy hybrid. As we say, hybrid is a foundation for all the online services. What we're seeing from Microsoft side, we deliver more and more services into online world, and the only condition for our customers to start utilizing these online services, things like cloud PBX with on-premise connectivity or meeting broadcast, is actually establishing the hybrid connection. So in this configuration was not supported up to probably 2 weeks ago, right? We've been doing a lot of work at the background, and since it wasn't supported, for past 12 months, we've seen some service providers actually moved into this proposition, where knowing that I don't want to go into tri-forest model, which is Forest 1 and native forest in the customer side, Forest 2 is a resource forest, and Forest 3 is an Azure Active Directory. Tri-forest wasn't supported. Service providers gone to the point where it's a native two-forest deployment, right? It's a viable solution. It's a very, very flexible. There's a lot of power, although there are some gotchas. And if you have a service provider who actually provide these kind of solutions, probably have a chat with them. And some of the gotchas were, because I'm a service provider, I provide you the service. My users in the user forest account, I also will have administrators. So you had to go and create this big complexity that how do I stop my administrators or enterprise admins for the main forest actually coming in and start screwing at my Sky for Business server, right? So there's been a lot of work needs to put in place to make sure Sky for Business server is protected purely from the SLA perspective, to make sure the SLAs are not breached and service provider is not copying a lot of penalties. So these are the options for kind of on-premise deployment, and as we have stated, hybrid is the new kind of buzzword. We're seeing a lot of interest in hybrid deployments. Hybrid is not really kind of a topology. It's a very specific configuration. So hybrid, talking in very old terms, as we call it, split domain. It is the environment where you have got Sky for Business, server deployed on-premise, and you have got Sky for Business online tenant. you basically split, you extend your domain and start supporting Microsoft.com, let's say, SIP domain supported by Skype for Business on-premise and supported by Skype for Business online service. It is a requirement to enable some of the specific online services. As we said, it is not a topology, it is a configuration. And it has a very specific limitations. First of all, it doesn't work across anything other than multi-tenant Office 365 service. Secondly, the receiving end of the hybrid always have to be Office 365. You cannot establish a hybrid between Skype for Business servers when you have got two service provider clouds. We have a number of service providers who are hosting Skype for Business service as a service. You can't establish hybrid between those two environments. And now, as of 2 weeks ago, we actually starting supporting the single forest or multi-forest deployment, but it has very specific conditions around it. So let's have a look at them. So, single forest, you have got your Active Directory, you deploy your Skype for Business infrastructure on premise, you deploy your gateway infrastructure, you put your edge infrastructure into the DMZ, you provision your online tenant, which means you will have your Azure Active Directory tenant, Skype for Business Edge, and Skype for Business. All Skype for Business online services are provisioned. Now, the first thing you need to think of, what am I going to do with my accounts? Again, we're going back to the business. I keep repeating, but it's really worth it because there's a lot of confusion. The way I synchronize my accounts from on-premise to online directory is using directory synchronization. The AAD Connect, Directory Sync, or some other of the tools theme will actually take the users on-premise and actually will create those users inside Azure Active Directory. Second, you need to think about authentication. If I'm happy for my cloud services, cloud directory to authenticate users, that's all I need, nothing else. I don't have to have ADFS. Why I'm repeating this? Because up to probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, while AAD Connect was in a preview, there was a requirement for hybrid to have ADFS in place. Not anymore. So ADFS is an optional element from the perspective of Skype for Business, in case if you would like all users logging into online services to be authenticated by on-premise Active Directory. That's the only time you really can bring ADFS into the picture. So synchronizing accounts and taking care of the authentication business. Then you need to do a bit of adjustments. I'm not going to go through the command line, guys. You need to enable your online tenant, Skype for Business service, to support basically split domain. And once it is enabled, then you will go back to your Skype for Business infrastructure, and then you can assign user into Skype for Business on-premise. And then if you decided to move user back to online services, it is a PowerShell command. You move the user basically into online service. Before doing that, you don't make sure you have got licenses and make sure you basically assign a license to the user. Once user is assigned with Skype for Business Online, then you can move user across to online services. I got a lot of questions, people asking, why would I do it? Why would I move it? Why would I have this kind of environment? The answer is probably not in the technology side. Answer is actually on the side where you should not be starting with technology. You should be going back and understanding your users, understanding your consumption of the services model, understanding how do they transact, what kind of features you use. I'll give you an example. Let's take mining company. If the mining company has an office, they're very heavy telephony users, they have a very complex network, they've got a call admission control requirements, they've got call recording compliance requirements, etc., etc. I will be putting them to the Skype for Business server infrastructure today. But the mining company may have a contractors who never actually hit the office. They may come to the office maybe once every 3 months, and the only obligation I have as a company to those users, give them collaborative capabilities. Give them IM and presence and bit of conferencing. Great. Can you easily bring 500 users immediately into Skype for Business? I haven't seen any customer who even tell me I can fire up 100 users tomorrow. Because bringing 100 users to the server, you need to think about capacity of the server, you need to think on infrastructure impact, network impact, etc., etc., etc. It is easier for me to bring users online, fire them up, give them capability, let them use it, and maybe 2-3 months later, I'll remove them, right? So it is not a technology-driven, it is more functionality and user consumption-driven decision. So that's the kind of a basics, that's a foundation. Let's have a look what else is possible. You may go to, hold on. It's the wrong slide. Shouldn't be here. Sorry, guys. Yeah. So you may go to the resource forest model. And I specifically didn't state it here, service provider. So let's look at the customer side. If you're a customer, it could be legitimate business for you to support resource forest deployment. You may have user forest isolated, you may have a server, services forest where you basically deploy all your servers. What we have started supporting, and this is where the AED Connect tool actually become the key element of this enablement once it's gone out of the preview mode. We will support Skype for Business deployment in a resource forest infrastructure. It is a very specific configuration. It is not very topology. It's a configuration. Let's go through some of the elements. You have got Active Directory with your users. You have your resource forest. It could be within your organization or it could be residing within your service provider network. And you have got your Skype for Business infrastructure deployed in the resource forest environment. You have your Office tenant or Office 365 tenant provisioned with Azure Active Directory, with Skype for Business Online services. So first of all, you provision your users into the resource forest. To make your resource forest working in a hybrid world, first of all, you need to make two-way trust between your user forest and resource forest. This is where kind of I get a big stop sign. Some of my customers telling me, well, if I'm going to establish two-way trust between my AD user forest and resource forest, I might just extend my Active Directory, right? So this is kind of the first sign needs to come into your mind. That's the one thing. Secondly, your AAD Connect, Azure Active Directory connector in this case, we are recommending to deploy in a resource forest, not in a user forest. Because what will happen, the most accurate information about the users will be actually located inside resource forest. Not different to the normal resource forest deployment where you deploy users, you disable them, you map your object SIDs to MSRTP object IDs, you bring it's all the same business stays as it is, but Azure Active Directory connector has the capability to actually talk to multiple forests inside your organization, talk to user forest, talk to your resource forest, basically combine all information, aggregate all information, and present that information as a single view, as a single stream back to Azure Active Directory inside your Office 365 tenant. So this is the kind of a second warning sign comes into the point. How many customers are going to allow service provider to do the Active Directory synchronization of their cloud while they are in the resource forest model? I don't know. We've got service provider here. Probably we should ask after the session. So that's a kind of a question which we need to speak with them. Then, in case if you would like to have authentication done not in the cloud, if you would like the authentication to done against Active Directory on-premise, you more than likely will deploy ADFS locally on the customer side, which is that ADFS is really sitting inside user forest environment. And in the most of the cases, those AED connect, again, we don't have a very specific guidance that AED connector have to join the main. AED connector can be standalone box sitting in the DMZ, or it doesn't have to join the main. But as you can see, there are so many moving parts in this environment that it probably makes, on my personal opinion, a little bit harder to consider this as a go-to model for service providers, right? Because there are so many ways that your AD connector needs to sit in a service provider environment. I need to establish two-way trust. I personally probably would spend a little bit more time with the customer and explore the options and possibilities to extend Active Directory services into their cloud. Because once I extend Active Directory, I will remove all these obstacles, and I'm not in a tri-forest mode, I'm in a two-forest mode of operation, which means everything else becomes a business as usual operation, right? So talk to us, please. There is a URL which describes in a very, very deep details how this works. There are a lot of advantages, disadvantages. You may have some conflicts with the accounts, but please talk to us if you have got this case and what we need to do. Probably go line by line and understand all the pros and cons of the solution and make sure not only service provider, but also customer is fully aware of the implications on the options. They have to go through this option. So, some other options and some of the announcements we have done with our services that's starting soon, early December. One of them was a Cloud PBX. And I can tell you what we have seen. I do a lot of work in Asia, in Southeast Asia, in Japan. I do a lot of work in New Zealand. A lot of customers were really confused on what is this Cloud PBX business. So what I'd like to do, I'd like to kind of give you a bit of explanation of what those terms are, and we'll go through some of the options. So Cloud PBX, it is an enhanced capability of Skype for Business Online. So when it is launched officially, early December, we will bring these capabilities that I've stated, all the telephony calling, numbering, enhanced telephony functionality will bring into the cloud. And it is from the licensing perspective, it needs to be the special license of a Cloud PBX license you need to acquire from Microsoft. So we are launching Cloud PBX worldwide. The day it is launched, it is available worldwide in every geography, and it's available off every data center we have, Office 365 as service. So Cloud PBX comes with two flavors. It's a Cloud PBX with PSTN calling. Let's understand what does it mean, PSTN calling. PSTN calling, it is when Microsoft gives customer option to acquire a number or port his existing numbers to Microsoft and assign a number to his Skype for Business Online users. Cloud PBX, everything is related to it. It is all related to the online services. So PSTN calling, it is when Microsoft assign a number or customer port his number into Microsoft and assign to user. And then customer need to acquire a calling plan from Microsoft, which means we will give them the calling plan so they can start placing a telephone calls, national calls, long distance, mobiles, etc., etc. That service, currently in preview in the United States, at the day of a launch will be available only in the United States. That's the deadline. Cloud PBX with PSTN calling, only available in the United States. It eventually will come to our region, so wait a little bit more, probably a couple of weeks, when we make an announcement, and then we'll give you more specific dates on a roadmap on when this service is coming into our region. So it would be really unfair to give users the full functionality in the US and not to give anyone else, especially for us in our Asian region. So we give you the second flavor of the Cloud PBX. It's called Cloud PBX with on-premise PSTN connectivity. What does it mean? In a nutshell, it is capability for me as a user, as a company, to acquire Skype for Business Cloud PBX online account, tenant, get the service, and use my local telephone numbers from my local SIP trunk providers or PSTN tribe providers, E1, whatever PM services I have, and take a telephone number, take my full DID from local office and map to my online user. So my only online user, apart from IM, instant messaging, presence, and conferencing, also the user will be able to start placing telephone calls and receiving. That's the functionality of on-premise PSTN connectivity, and it will be launched day one when it is launched. Cloud PBX will be available worldwide. That means since the Cloud PBX with PSTN calling is not going to be available outside of US, I see for us in Asia, most of the selling motion is going to be Cloud PBX with on-premise PSTN connectivity. That's going to be our kind of main motion of selling. Now, very common question, which I have a slide for tomorrow, but I don't have it here, but I really would like to touch it. We're also launching PSTN conferencing service. PSTN conferencing service, it is ability for user to acquire dial-in and dial-out PS conferencing numbers for the Skype for Business online conferences hosted in the cloud. It's a Microsoft service. If you have online service today, you can acquire, as we call them, audio conferencing services providers for two vendors in our region. It is PGI Global and Intercall. They can give you Australian numbers and you can acquire those, which means when you create Skype for Business online conference, you can get a number people can dial in. PSTN conferencing will give you Microsoft numbers. Now, again, day one, they're launching in US, but they're going to be more rapidly actually bringing the service. Because PSTN calling requires us, Microsoft, to go and acquire licensing, think about number portability, etc., etc. Where the PSTN conferencing, probably I would say a little bit less complex. So, be careful. Cloud PBX with on-premise PSTN connectivity, when you take my local telephone number and assign for user in a cloud, it only can be used for dialing in and dialing out. You cannot use those local PSTN numbers to access Skype for Business online hosted conferences. Well, so at this stage, the service is not available. I'm having a chat with the product group. There's a lot of thinking going beyond that to probably think how we can extend that. We brought attention to the product group. Since I'm using local dialing in to the user, probably good idea actually to bring those as numbers. As it is not available. Please don't come back after a week and say, you said during a conference that this will be available. No, it's not available. But hopefully it will come one day. So let's have a look. Cloud PBX with on-premise connectivity. Now, you can have Skype for Business on-premise, right? So this is going back to the mining customer example I was giving you. If I'm a miner in E5 or whatever company I am, I can have my Skype for Business on-premise infrastructure, and I have basically extended my Active Directory. Basically, I have got my online environment. I'm subscribed to Skype for Business online service. I can, in this case, if you acquire Skype for Business online Cloud PBX licensing, if I enable you for that, you can use your local gateway, whatever trunks it gets. It may get direct trunks for trunk provider, or it may get trunks from your local PBX. So basically, you can take the number and assign, in this case, to the online user. So going back to my example, the case where I had 300 people coming in online, I could provide them online, and with this functionality, I can give them also dialing in and dialing out functionality. This is the environment where I have Skype for Business on-premise, fully deployed. So the hybrid is the foundation for this service. You have to be in a hybrid environment, which means, again, repeating myself, you need at least Azure Active Directory connector established, or if you would like to have a single sign-on experience or authentication using claim-based methodology against on-premise Active Directory, you need to go to the ADFS service. So there could be situations where customer doesn't have on-premise Skype for Business deployment, right? It is purely online Skype for Business they have, but they have got some trunks locally on their local PBX. And that's the strategy they have. They would like to go on that way. So what actually we will support in that case, you are provisioned inside Microsoft tenant as a cloud PBX user. You don't have none of the Skype for Business server deployed within your network. So what we will ask you, we'll ask you to deploy, we call it minimal topology. We'll ask you to deploy Edge. We even will give you the virtual machines. We'll ask you to deploy Edge, and Edge will be responsible for traditional Edge functions. Access Edge, it will run a SIP stack, it will be the media relay, and also will do the outbound routing. And we'll ask you to deploy the second virtual machine as a mediation server on-premise. Now, again, going back to that on-premise thing, the on-premise part can be in a customer side, in a customer data center, or can be possibly hosted by somewhere within a hoster or telco, whatever, right? So in that case, what will happen, customers always will sign to online service. You will assign them the telephone numbers from the gateway, and they will be able to dial in and dial out. So this service will cater when you don't have Skype for Business on-premise, and will be available at the day of the launch of the PBX, cloud PBX functionality. Early December when we launch it, will be available. So, it's been quick, good. Some of the takeaways, synchronization and authentication is a really important element. Please have a chat with the customer, make sure they understand what they have existing. That's really important. Try to position the platform, which is Skype for Business Online server, or Skype itself. Try to position platform from the point that it's not the functions drive it, it's actually user demand for functions, right? It's what's important for user, what is their consumption models. That's what actually defines where do I put. I know we are all technical people. We like to get into architecture, build kind of the prototypes, make them all integrated and working together. That's good, but really what's important, what is going to be the user profiles, and actually what's going to be the consumption models. And understand your end goal, really, what you, in the end, what you want to deliver to your customer. Right? That's really, really important. So on this note, I'll open for questions. Yes? You want to use microphone? Yeah, walk. Walk, Ben, that helps.
Hi. You mentioned in the Skype for Business Online scenarios that it doesn't support call admission control. From a software development perspective, why can't the team implement call admission control in the cloud?
No, it's not a question of why can't. It's a question of when it will be available. They are looking into that. Eventually, we will. The goal is to basically get to the same parity on the functionality between on-premise and online. How much of the gap we have, it's only controlled by the time. So we are looking into deploying call admission control. I believe so soon you will see response group functionality, for example, coming into online. That's coming, that's on the way. So it's just a matter of time when that will be. It's not saying explicitly no, we're saying when, that's a factor. Thanks. Yes?
Yeah, I had a roadmap question. I found deploying load-balanced edge servers to be really complex compared to other Microsoft technologies. Any plans to simplify that?
Let me see if I understand you right. So deploying load-balanced edge servers, it's a very complex. You talking about deploying hardware load balancers in front of
with hardware load balancers?
With hardware load balancers?
Yeah.
Any particular reason why you are deploying hardware load balancers?
Oh, we've used our existing infrastructure, and it worked and it was supported, but it's very complex.
But we are recommending to do the DNS load balancing in 99% of the cases and only use hardware load balancers if you have to. There is one reason to do the hardware load balancer.
For the edge servers, yeah.
Yeah, there's only one reason for edge service to do hardware load balancer. If you have public IP addresses on an edge network, on an edge interfaces.
Yes, yeah, we did.
You have?
Yep.
Oh, well, you fall into that 1%.
Yeah.
Look, it's, I know where you're coming. I think the complexity comes that certain traffic will go through, then certain traffic have to bypass the HLBs. How to say, it's, maybe you need a little bit more training. Come to the training sessions or come and have a chat with us. We could do a little bit of whiteboard session, explain you. It shouldn't be that complex.
Well, I just like the sheer number of ports, the fact that some traffic goes through load balancers, others go directly through edge servers.
3 ports, really, you need. Not the 50,000 range. You need only 3 ports. Well, ideally, I want you a lot, but we've been, no, you don't need that many ports. Come and have a chat with us. Let me understand a little bit better what's your pain point is there.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. I can't hear you. You really have to come to microphone. Hey, for the edge, come on. Come and grab some stuff. For the edge. Edge question was a good one. Yes, Adish.
Hey, Vakhtang, in your presentation, you did talk about the cloud PBX with on-premise PSTN connectivity, right? I'm just thinking out loud here. Is Express Route the recommended option for that?
Is the Express Route recommended option for cloud PBX on-premise connectivity? You need to think of what's going to be the traffic condition, what's going to be the operational condition when do my traffic will come to Office 365. The condition will be if you are on a conference call, yes, ideally I'd love you to be on Express Route. Would you be able to afford it? It's another question. But if you can afford it, it's absolutely, you need to consider Express Route in most of your cases if you're running completely off the cloud.
Or can we actually do, how do you present yourself in media bypass scenario?
There's no media bypass for,
okay, cool, fair enough.
For cloud PBX yet. Have to be careful with yet.
Thanks, man.
Yes. Oh, sorry, yes.
Sorry, hi. Sorry. In a hybrid deployment, what kind of monitoring and health can you get of the overall system rather than individual, like the on-premises environment versus the online environment?
That's a great question. We're going to provide you more enhanced reporting than what you have today with Office 365 on the Skype for Business Online. If you use Skype for Business Online today, yeah, okay, reporting is not that good, right? I agree, I have to say. If you're familiar with the quality dashboard monitoring, we're working very hard to get that tool online against running online. We're working on it. Okay, I'm not promising. I'm probably breaking the rules telling you this. We're working to get that level of monitoring. We're going to give you a little bit more enhanced monitoring. But you need to remember the fact if the user is homed against Skype for Business server, everything is going to come from the server. Your presence, your modalities, voice, stats, everything comes from the server. If user is hosted online, all the services are coming from online, so we do not split the workloads. If you have a very specific requirements to do very specific monitoring, you probably need to rethink again and think, what do I need? Is the online going to give me enough capability? And if it's not, I probably need to move to the server. But maybe some users is good enough for them, so I can move them into online. But the whole idea, if the quality dashboard, we're trying to bring that actually, make available online. Thank you. Yes?
You might have already answered my question with the 3 ports for the earlier question.
Yep.
The consumer edition of Skype is pretty notorious for people that have to manage it with firewalls and quality of service and things like that. Is the Skype for Business 2015 any different in that regard?
Client
Um,
or server end?
well, both. My main interest is being able to control Skype traffic on networks where we have limited bandwidth.
Yep. No different. I got a point. It's a very good question. How much can I control the behavior of the Skype for Business client? No different to what you do with Link 2013. Exactly. You have call admission control. You have various policy enforcements when you shut, for example, multi-view for the conferencing. You set the limited bandwidth for video call, for voice call. You can enforce them to use very specific port ranges on the client side for voice, for video, for sharing file transfer. We've seen a lot of customers actually stopping file transfers, for example, from the client because they know what's actually happening. You adjust your policies based on the bandwidth needs you have in place. It's a little bit opposite. You don't actually take a client, try to squeeze to the bandwidth because client is there at the remote side and various modalities are consumed. If you don't have enough bandwidth, there's two things you can do. You either upgrade it or you enforce them not to use certain modalities. But difference-wise, probably know that Silk codec from voice perspective is probably bandwidth-wise, look, it's more or less the same. It's probably more responsive, but I would say if you have a pretty poor link at remote sites, there's not much stuff is going to help you out of the box. You need to kind of go deep down, understand the traffic, understand the usage, and start enforcing policies. Thank you. Yes?
With the online-only model, if you've got regulatory compliance conditions where you've got to log all instant message and conference traffic and things like that, is that a capability of the online model?
Not yet. Not yet. In a lot of cases, think about this. The online service is the multi-tenant, publicly hosted service that's run on a shared infrastructure. Okay? So you need to understand to bring functionality, it takes us time actually to bring that. There's going to be always cases where you need to go very deep on the compliance. You've got third-party applications, you need to do recording of the calls, you need to deploy, for example, ethical wall. If I need to control who inside the organization can talk to the different federated entities, if I want to say Vachtan can't federate with Cisco friends, but he can federate with Fujitsu friends, for example. If you need this kind of control, you will have requirements to bring something like third-party applications. At this stage, for third-party applications, you need server, but there is a roadmap for us to bring API opening. Again, we're working on it. If you request Microsoft guys, some of our guys can actually come and have a chat with you, or we can give you some roadmap where there is a roadmap. We're thinking, I think it's probably early next year, we're thinking to actually start opening up the APIs. And that's where the third-party applications work. They mostly work through the APIs to deliver that functionality. So out of the box, I would say, nah, you need to go to on-premise, but evaluate the user cases. That's going back to that basics.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? No? All right, guys. We're 15 minutes earlier. Thank you very much. So I hope you enjoyed. I'll hope to see you tomorrow on the sessions. Thank you.